Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Vobes show. It's a Tuesday. It's the 19th of June, 2018, and my sister is here in the studio in a back room of a terrace house in Worthing, down in West Sussex, at the foot of the South Downs and the edge of the English Channel. So, welcome to the lovely Corinne. Hooray! Hello, Corinne. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Marvellous. Nice to have you back in the studio. By popular demand, it seems. Yes, yeah. I get letters in every day going, Richard, when's your sister coming in?
Yes. Keep going.
Yes,
keep going.
that's
I
right.
love
And then
it.
they
I love
say,
it.
we want your sister because all those medical stories of our hospital stuff, all of the adventures on the what's that walk?
Camino.
The Camino
Camino.
walk. That's it. With the camels, the 3 humped camels. We
No,
want to know
no
all about
camels,
that.
but donkeys.
Oh, donkeys, I beg your pardon. And all of that nonsense. So, they're always saying it. Which is fantastic. Let's see if there's anybody out there in the world of the Vobie One-Eye Kenobi. And yes, they are. Fantastic. Here we go. We've got Andy Ash, Richard Suggett, Anne Osborne. We've got the same names every day. It's
Hello,
amazing.
everybody.
Anne Evans, James DeWill, Mick Baines, Shirley Ward, Andy Ash, Pam Earnshaw, Cynthia Julian, Malcolm Glazier, Mark Selwood from down your neck. Well, Cornwall.
Close. Just down the way.
Just
Hello.
down the way,
Hello,
which
Mark.
is lovely to see. Paul Hine, we're all here. Mark English, you should be rehearsing, Mark English. You should be rehearsing. He's got big thumbs up. Nigel Sadler and Lane Blazer and Brazier, beg your pardon. Jennifer Stewart from across the pond, which is marvellous. Everybody's joining us, which is fantastic. Kevin Hall, Richard and Corinne, there we are. The brother and sister act, which is superb. And it's lovely to have you back here on a Tuesday.
Hello, Mark. Yes.
So I hope you can. I'm just going to move the microphone so that we can make sure we can hear you.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we thought, what should we talk about? Because obviously we've got Corinne is back because we're still doing a little bit of the old sorting out the father's estate
It's
business.
getting a bit... it's tedious. Today was hard, isn't it?
Tedious, hard, and repetitive. But, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting closer. We are getting closer because... I'll tell you in a second. We just have to get the music out of the way. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we've been writing cheques. We have the power of the executor. And we've written a very large cheque to a very unworthy person. Can't say more than that. We can't say who.
We'll be very cautious in what we
we've got to be a
say.
little bit cautious because who knows, there's probably another lawsuit coming, but we can't say more than that. But we've had to write a number of cheques to people.
But we've also written cheques to our kids.
We've also,
so that was nice, isn't it?
Fortunately, Dad had left a small paltry sum, has to be said, to his grandchildren. He didn't. He was somebody who never really wanted them close to him, and even after death, sadly, he didn't leave them much. But
they have been remembered.
They have been remembered.
That's
Yeah,
nice.
we remember them.
Oh.
Don't we, from time to
well,
time?
we will remember them, won't we?
Yes, I hope so. So we're not going to talk about any of that nonsense, clearing up the house.
You've heard it all before.
You've heard it all before. So we thought, well, what was she doing? We were scratching our brains, which is a hard thing to do when you've got a skull in the way and a bit of hair and all of that. So what we have done is we come up with some topics to discuss tonight. We know, of course, that you love the feedback. You love to get involved and tell us what's been going on and all that kind of malarkey.
Can I just say, Terry Wood, I've just seen his name, because you're in Paynton, aren't you, Terry? Devon. There we are.
A Devonshire lad, which is very nice. So we've got a number of topics, and we know that you like the feedback, and we know that you're going to help us out. And even on YouTube, you can tell us your stories as well, even though you're watching the show after the event. So we're going to, let's have a look and see what our first topic is. And this is one that actually Julia and I were going to talk about yesterday, but we never got to it. So we're going to get to it. We'll start off with your best or worst holiday experience. The holidays are coming, ladies and gentlemen. No doubt you've booked your holidays. You've got some lovely places planned. And hopefully you're going to do better than you did last year when all those horrible events happened. Things went wrong, didn't they? You know, you swore you'd never go with that airline. And as for that steward on the aeroplane, oh my goodness, how many letters of complaint were you going to write? You never got round to it. And the trouble with the Bureau de Change, all those sort of things. We want to hear about your best or worst holiday experience. Now, Corinne, you have been telling me about some of your experiences when you were young and single and, you know, hot foot and fancy free.
Yes, in your 20s.
In your 20s.
Stupid, in other words.
Yes, there we go. Young and ignorant and happy. And you said at the time, these events, they just went, it's fine. But afterwards you're going, really?
Well, you look back and you think, my God. So one of the things that we did, my ex-partner, Chris, and I used to do quite a lot of hitching around Europe.
Hitching?
Yeah.
Do you think people could do that now?
Well, people do hitch,
They still hitch?
I mean, Oscar hitches, my son, yeah.
Gosh,
yeah.
And do you worry about that?
No, I don't think. Well, no, not really.
Okay,
Oscar's a chap, isn't he?
Well,
so
he is a chap.
Less to worry about. Maybe for women, maybe it's more.
Right.
But anyway,
he's not a big, fat, beefy bloke, is he?
No.
He's quite vague about what he wants. I mean, I'm not putting
vague.
Oscar. I'm not putting Oscar down in any way, but you know, all your children,
he's slight. Yes,
he's slight. Yes. Whereas if it was your eldest, I would have thought he's got more meat on him and can go
stand up for himself.
Yes, if somebody was to take advantage.
I think the truth of it is that the people that pick people up generally are decent.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think that Oscar really feels that threatened.
Oh, okay.
So,
well,
but anyway.
So hang on, we're just getting some. I have to go to them when they come in because they'll disappear.
They'll go,
Matthew Holdsworth says, I used to work for Kiwoni Travel. I'm obviously no good at pronouncing funny foreign words, but I got some real educationals from there, including a safari to Tanzania and seeing some wonderful hotels in Zanzibar, business class to Dar as well. I'm not sure where Dar is, but... it's not Durdledor or Durdledar. Richard Suggett says, no food on the plane was the worst. The airline collapsed, which is a bit worrying mid-air. Your operator got a replacement. When we got home after the holiday, we found a letter explaining...
We may not get food.
We may not get food.
It was a bit late.
Well, that's dreadful. Better late than never, I suppose. There we are. So... fantastic. Philip Naylor's joined. Kevin Hall says, my holiday 2 years ago, I went to Weston-super-Mare. What a dump place that is. Although I did go to Wells, Wookey Hole and the Cheddar Gorge. Those places were brilliant.
The Cheddar Gorge is absolutely fabulous.
I did go to the Cheddar Gorge, and when I first went there with a mate, Paul Stoneman, and we did some podcasting, the thing about it is, it did seem much smaller than I imagined it would be.
Yes.
You kind of drive through it and go, oh... Sorry, was that it? And then you go back and then you actually... Because you're driving through it and you're going, wow, this is amazing. And then that was amazing. We need to reverse up a bit. It just seemed a bit small. So, Corinne, tell us your story.
So we were hitching and we were in Portugal. And for some reason, we hadn't booked a hotel for the night. I don't know what we were doing. I can't remember the details. But anyway, we got our sleeping bags out and we went to sleep in the doorway of a shop.
Right.
We were in our 20s. Nobody would do that now, would they? Because everybody's so much more sophisticated. But we thought that was a reasonable thing to do. Anyway, we were woken up in the small hours by a Portuguese policeman who was pointing a gun at us.
Oh, my goodness.
Because it's illegal.
Oh, it's illegal.
Well, it was. They weren't in the EU, so I don't know what the rules would be now. But it was illegal. So, yeah. So we were woken up by having a gun pointed in our face.
What did you do, though?
Well, we just explained we were English and we were probably just let off the hook.
Oh, right.
I don't really remember. I just remember being woken up by having a gun being pointed at me. But even then, I think, because we were young, we didn't really kind of clock the significance of it. You look back and you think, yeah.
But they didn't arrest you or put you in prison.
They
obviously
told us to move on.
Oh, and you just sort of moved on in the middle of it.
Shuffled on.
And because it was Portugal, it wasn't cold, presumably?
No.
I mean, worse if you got to a hotel or not a hotel and we got nowhere to stay and it's freezing cold.
Yeah.
and it's wet.
Well, it was our choice. I mean, God knows what we were doing, but we were slamming it.
Right. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Paul Hine says his worst holiday, flight to Poland, after the doors seals failed mid-flight, oxygen masks on, and continued the flight for a further hour.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody got sucked out of a smashed window then. That's always what I would slightly worry about.
Must have been quite claustrophobic, though, flying with those masks on. I imagine that was quite horrible.
And yet, it's funny because we're all so well cushioned now, and you drive in cars, you don't even know you're moving anymore, and you're in aeroplanes, you don't even know you've taken off anymore. Everything's so protected around you. We're in a bubble. I think sometimes, to actually be aware that your fly have oxygen masks, because they would have had those oxygen masks in the old days. You would have had, I don't know, it's like, for me, driving, you should remember that you're in a vehicle going at speed. When everything's taken away from you, it's so easy to forget, because bang, you've had an accident.
Well, it's very easy to be speeding, isn't it, without realising.
Without realising it, yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
Most places in the UK are small, aren't they? Says James DeWill.
Yes.
Most places in the UK are small.
So therefore, in keeping with that, the Cheddar Gorge is small.
Yes, that's true.
Not like in America.
Compared to what? Well, that's the thing, James DeWill. Compared to what? What are you comparing it with? Matthew Holter says, funny experience was in Zanzibar on our honeymoon when we went on a dolphin viewing experience where the captain was a teenager. And the boat was being bailed out by a boy and a dustpan. We never saw any dolphins.
No, but you had a very memorable...
You had a memorable experience, but I wonder if you were sold a pup.
Well, you must have been.
There's a teenage boy going, yeah, no worries, mate, get on the back of this. Yeah, and the little kid doing it out of it. I wonder, it wasn't Cook's Tours, was it? Let's put it like that. Corinne looks so respectable as well.
I'm not.
She's not respectable. She's my sister, She's got the same bloodline.
Looks are deceiving, aren't they, Mark? That's the thing.
See, the thing is, Corinne went to university or did university degree stuff, and so she looks and sounds intelligent, but, she's as thick as me, really.
She's a Lindsay.
She's a Lindsay, yeah. So there we go. Judith Oakley says, no real bad holiday experiences. No real bad horror experience. My then husband, your ex, lost his wedding ring in the sea on the honeymoon in Greece.
Aww.
Yeah, well, you see, it would never happen to me because I don't wear any jewellery whatsoever. I don't wear a watch. I don't have piercings in, so nothing would be lost. But I'd be very upset if a camera fell overboard. Yeah. Do you wear earrings and piercings and tattoo? Oh, you've got a tattoo, but that's a different thing.
I have... No, not really. I have had my ears pierced, but they've...
But that's a sort of such a tradition. I mean, rings and things can fall off. I know when I was going out with Harriet, she had a signet ring, and sometimes, some days, I don't know whether she just lost weight. Some days she'd be pointing at things like this, and the thing would fly off, and she would go, "Oh my goodness, my signet ring, my signet ring." But I gather you have to be quite posh to have a signet ring, because it was engraved with the family emblem, not the album,
the album,
family album. There's loads of pictures to put on here. I can't do it. The emblem. Yes,
a coat of arms.
A coat of arms. Yeah, maybe it was a coat of arms, whatever it was. So there we go. James DeWill says, cushioned, good way to describe middle-age spread. Well. You talk for yourself, mate. I'm losing weight. Corinne's never had weight. We haven't got middle-age spread. Get yourself up and do some exercises, he says. But we're still young pups, so that may be not quite right. Matthew Holdsworth, most bizarre place I stayed was in the Hans Brinker hostel in Amsterdam. When I worked for Keone's student travel division, it was properly grim. They used to advertise by putting flags in dog poo left around the city. Well, I suppose there's a use for those turds, isn't there? Little flags.
It's amazing.
Come and stay in our shitty place. Why not? It's a stinker, but it's cheap for you lovely students. Oh, that's amazing.
The Hans Brinker hostel.
Yes, somewhere to be avoided, I think, ladies and gentlemen.
There's some pretty disgusting hostels in China, I have to say.
Oh yes. So your China experience.
Well, the whole thing. I mean, it was brilliant, and it was, very, very enjoyable, but only probably in retrospect.
Oh, right.
Because it was so stressful. I've never had the experience before of being somewhere where you don't have a clue what's going on ever. You never have a clue.
Because the language.
You can't understand the language. You can't read the language. It's not like being in Europe where you can basically work things out. It's not like that at all. Nothing makes any sense. And Chinese people sound quite angry. The language sounds angry. So the experience is endlessly being shouted at by people in a language you don't understand.
That's an interesting observation. I hadn't thought about that. Is it? I don't know if we've got any Chinese people watching.
They're not angry.
It's just from our Western perspective.
It's how it sounds.
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
And the worst experience was we were on this coach. I mean, I just hate guided tours and coach trips. It's not my thing at all. But when we were going to see the Terracotta Warriors, the only way to do that is to go on a coach trip. So Lulu, my Chinese friend, organised that. And I mean, from the moment we got on, and it was about an hour and a half's journey, the moment we got on, it's just this guide shouting at us all in Chinese. And, whatever you did is so loud. It's so loud. You put music on in the little headphones. You couldn't get this shouty Chinese voice that you couldn't understand anything for an hour and a half.
It always seems very fast, the Chinese language. Chinese, when you hear them talking. And I'm sure it's like with any language, a different language, that when people are talking to you in their language fluently, they're talking at the speed that most people would understand. And I guess you could say the same for a lot of English people who are talking incredibly fast. However, I don't know whether I don't understand how the Chinese language works, whether it's a lot of high... it's just different. It's a whole different...
Well, it's a pictorial language. So I think words are put together from pictures, and that doesn't make any sense. I don't really know how to explain it.
Because you did do a bit of learning, didn't you?
Yeah, and so the words are made up of symbols. I know ours are made up of symbols, but ours are made up of symbols which you can phonetically spell out.
Yes.
Whereas there's a visual symbols.
So do they use noun, adjectives, verbs? No, verbs. To be, to go. I'm going here, or is it I here go?
Yes, I think it's more the latter. But please correct me, anybody who knows, because I just, I had a taste of it.
So no, we're not slagging off by any means. It's, but it's just sometimes a Western perspective on something, especially if you've never been to somewhere, can be overwhelming.
Paul Hines saying that they had some lovely holidays in China. Did you find it overwhelming? Because
his wife is Chinese.
Oh, yes.
So you had a guide, presumably.
We had a guide, but... Katie and we were still just, I don't know, we were lost. We were just lost.
And I suppose it's that sense of being out of control that you just, there's so much is going on because it was busy.
Yes.
You said that the population was vastly...
Well, and there's no cultural cues. So the things that we do, which are our cultural cues, they're different. So you just could never work out what you were supposed to be doing, what was going on.
Yes.
And it was pretty exhausting.
Yes.
It was quite stressful. But
you want to go back?
Oh, yeah, definitely go back because it's so interesting.
Right.
It's so interesting to put yourself in that situation. It was like, wow, you just don't have that experience.
No. Yeah, well, but I guess having had the experience, you know what to expect, so you can probably get more out of it.
Be easier, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Matthew Holter says, my China visit was perhaps different to Corinne. I went there running a trip for this travel company and taking 10 travel agents with me, all female and all the same age as my mum. He was 25 at the time. It was like taking my mum and her friends on holiday. It must have been quite fun, I would have thought. All those mature women to escort around in China. Andy Ash says, all this is making me hungry. Oh, what? Because it's Chinese. Yes. Well, there we go. James DeWill says it's a syllable stressed language.
Syllable stressed.
So you're stressing on... Well, I mean, English is
so
syllable,
does that
isn't it?
mean it's phonetic in the same way? I might have completely misunderstood something about it.
Because in China, Paul Hein says there's many different languages, such as Mandarin, Cantonese, and etc. I think the etc. language...
I think we were speaking etc.
Yes, etc. is a very good one. Matthew Holdsworth again says, stayed in some amazing hotels in China, but they were showing us to travel agents, and we were treated to enormous banquets every lunch and night. We craved chips and a few days. I'm not surprised. And the rice spirit stuff was lethal. Did you drink the rice?
We didn't drink any alcohol, which is definitely one reason to go back, because we just never tried it.
Never tried. What? We just not offered it, or?
Yeah, didn't. That's
never appealed.
No, the chance didn't seem to come up. I think it's because Lulu didn't drink.
Oh, well, there you are. Yeah. So what did you do in the evenings? Did you go to bars or places like that?
Not really. We did some street food, which is, one of the things you're not supposed to do, because it's supposed to all be too
dead
unhealthy.
Dogs and various things.
But we did street food and just generally, we did a lot of very bizarre things. I mean, we were going around. We visited the city of Xi'an, and that's a walled city. And Lulu decided that she wanted to walk round the whole circumference of the wall. So we started off 10 minutes before the gates closed or something. And,
oh, right.
And, got stuck up there. So we were always doing stupid things. But my holiday was the opposite experience to... is it Paul that was talking about?
Oh yeah, Paul Hein.
Because I went as a 50-something-year-old woman with two 25-year-olds.
Oh yeah, so
they had their equivalent of their mother being dragged around, and I had trying to keep up with them.
Graham Whittington says, when I went to Moscow, I went on my own. That was fun, trying to find your way around a city and travelling on the underground system.
Yes.
No Russian words made any sense. No, it must have been fun. What made you want to do that? I mean, maybe I'm just too safe. I would like to travel around the world, actually, but I like to go and know something about the place. And also, my travels in England at the moment, with what I'm doing with the walks and stuff, just shows me the minutiae of England is so fascinating that in one place, you start to look... Although things on the surface look the same, actually, you notice how different one street is to another, and the architecture and all of that. So for me, I'm quite happy and quite content to go around England before it's all destroyed. So, anyway, shall we choose another subject?
Yes.
We've got another topic for you, ladies and gentlemen. It's exciting, isn't it? Different topics. So, how are you on coincidences? I want to find out from you guys, what is your biggest coincidence? Things that happened to you that perhaps, were ordained from above, or was just simply a coincidence. Something maybe mysterious happened that brought you and somebody else together just as you were thinking of them, or it just seems to be that the world is much smaller than you imagine. For example, I happened to hear today that the video we put out with Matthew Holdsworth and I going up the church tower with this very nice chap David Gilmore, it turns out that Matthew's wife, Angie, had seen the video and went, oh, he's the bloke who taught me maths, I think it was, at school. And you go, that's a small world, isn't it? What are the chances, as Harry Hill would say. So what small world or coincidences have you had? And we want to hear about those. Have you had any strange coincidences in your weird coincidences that you kind of think, well, I don't know, how can that be?
Well, I must have, to be honest, I must have, mustn't I? Because we all have them.
We all have those.
And they're fairly frequent occurrence, aren't they,
yeah.
I think? But I'm afraid I can't think of any recently.
No. I was trying to think of it was that inspired me to think, yeah, these small worlds. You're going down the street and you're thinking of somebody, and then they are walking up to you. Yeah,
I think often at work that you will have. I'll look after somebody that will, be connected to in some way. But then, Devon is still quite a small world place, actually. So in Exeter and even in Bristol, there are still lots of people who all really know each other. Really,
right.
It's very cohesive.
Yes, I mean, I always think in history, it's interesting when you read up about one particular person from history. and suddenly, they've got a connection with somebody else who you think, oh yeah, I've read about them, and they all seem to know each other. All these big but then you think, oh well, actually there were so fewer people back then, and that no wonder a lot of history is this family suddenly was with this family.
Well, I know, didn't they sort of intentionally organise it so that they would be marrying into families as well?
Absolutely, yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I think the whole marriage thing. If you look at marriage, I heard this interesting thing, reminded of this interesting thing, that marriage was not really about love. Love is a very late comer to marriage. Marriage, particularly for the families who've got money, and you look at kings and queens, they were continually trying to marry off a daughter or a son to ensure that they
Isn't that called courtly love? Is that the thing?
I don't know
if
they call it that. Yeah. But they marry them so that, the daughter can go and get in with this family who are rich, and so that they get a big dowry, and they, it's influence, isn't it? It was to do with influence, power and money, and love had nothing to do with it. And often, they slept in separate rooms. They didn't really have a lot to do with each other. And the men, and no doubt the women, were having affairs left, right and centre, and nobody really batted an eye.
Yeah, and that also must have been why the priest needed to consummate, to make sure that the marriage had been consummated. Because if they were just like marrying for other reasons and sleeping in separate bedrooms, it might not have, in that way it could be like not really a marriage.
Yes, I never really sort of understood the, how important it was to have it consummated, so to say.
That's what makes it a marriage, I believe.
It makes it very, but yes. So there we go. What else are people saying? Joe Smith, hello Joe, says English is a stress-timed language. That means some syllables will be longer and some will be shorter. Many languages, however, are syllable timed, which means each syllable has the same length. Oh, that's interesting. Examples are similar timed languages: French, Spanish, Cantonese.
Oh, well, thank you. That's interesting.
So is that down to the vowel sounds? Is that or syllables? Because, I mean, you think of some vowel... Well, I suppose you can have... if you're going... if you're in the park calling for a dog, and your dog is called Rover, you might go, Rover! But it's not really a syllable, is it? You're just stressing a vowel, so I'm talking rubbish, as ever. Russian underground.
I'm very confused now.
Well, because and some vowels you say you stress.
The syllables are the chunks of the word.
Yes,
though,
that's
aren't
right.
they?
Yes, no, that's why I was just wondering whether because some vowels you say longer, don't you? Or you don't have to. Rover, you could go rover. Rover. Yeah, so English is stress timed, so that means some syllables will be longer.
Yeah.
Is
that why it
England.
sounds? Is that
England.
why?
So yeah, land is longer
England.
than ing, isn't it?
Yeah.
England.
Yeah. Is that why Chinese they sound cross?
Is that why the Chinese always sound cross? Anyway, that'd be interesting. So what about coincidences? Have we got any coincidences? Kevin Hall says, I could tell you about a coincidence that happened to Sue Blount, but it would take too long, but it is amazing. Perhaps for another day. Maybe you could record it on your phone and send it in, and we'll get your, long-winded stories would be great to play in. We always love to play in videos and share them, so that would be really cool. So do that. Andy Ash says, wearing a long leather coat. I'm not quite sure what that's got to do with anything, but there we are. James DeWill says, shared a room in a dormitory in Cairns, is it in Australia, with a guy I'd never met whose parents lived next to my grandparents in a remote village in West Scotland. So there you go. That's an interesting coincidence. Mark Selwood says, coincidences like that, James, make you wonder if there is a world plan. Well,
is there?
Is there a world plan? Has it all been written? And if it has, it must have taken a bloody long time to write it down beforehand. If there is a maker up there going, yes, well, what we'll do is we'll have this chap stay in this remote place, and he'll be next to his grandparents. I mean, how long would it? The planning meetings.
It must be a laugh, isn't it? Oh, what shall I? Oh, let's have him and them. I mean, it was quite amusing, isn't it?
And now, if we've got more people in the world than ever before, you know, whoever's planning everything must be just having steam out of their ears, going, "Oh my God, I can't cope with this." Well, we'll have this happening and there, and maybe they've got computer algorithms up there which are doing it, and we're all just the result of some vast computer program. Who knows? And that the computer, you know, doesn't like the coincidences, but I imagine, you know, every now and again it'll throw them up.
So actually, folks, we are in the Matrix.
We are in the Matrix, yeah. James, well, oh, I've read that one. And I've read that one. Linda Kane says, I volunteer at a local library, went on a Rhine cruise, and a very annoying lady from the morning group was on it too. Couldn't believe, a complete coincidence. Imagine, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? You go away somewhere.
To get away from them.
And people turn up and you go, oh my God, it's ruined your holiday. Or not, maybe it's not. It's all part of the rich tapestry and coincidences of life, says Andy Ash. I knew I went wrong somewhere. No master plan, it's just life. Andy,
I remember Dad turning up at something in that similar way when I lived in Sussex.
Oh, right.
And I lived in East Preston. That was a good old while ago. And my kids were small. I went to a yoga class. Your Dad liked all that sort of stuff.
Oh, and he turned up in a yoga class.
So, well, I went in and I was paying and I could hear this male voice and I was thinking to myself, sounds like Dad.
And were you in a leotard and all those sort of things?
All of
and
that.
Your father turned up.
I think we were both highly embarrassed.
Oh, dear.
I think he was with some young woman as well, you know.
Oh, my goodness. Yes. Well, there we are.
Showing off his prowess at yoga.
I can do... Yeah, no, how interesting. So we'll have to save your most embarrassing moments for another time, or if we run out of time in today's show, which will be good. Dave Salsona says, I was on holiday in the UK from the USA, and I was in Leicester Square one day people watching, and this guy came up to me and says, I know you from somewhere. I knew instantly where I knew him. I had trained him at a job years earlier. In LA.
Oh, yes.
Small world. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, occasionally, I go into Morrison's, which is near me, and occasionally I've had it about 3 or 4 times now, where people have said, Bald Explorer. But that's not really coincidence, because obviously I'm a little bit out there, but not much. But it is a weird feeling when people know you from somewhere.
What about when we were in Worthing and I went to buy the... poppy.
Oh, yeah.
And the poppy seller said to me, oh, you're Corinne, aren't you?
Oh, yes.
No idea who he was
at all.
No
idea. And I then suddenly thought, wait, I know who you are. And I kept thinking, I know your name, but I'm not going to say it in case I'm wrong, because he was a short ass. He was a short ass. He was a shorty when we knew him years and years ago at school. And now he was this tall, thin chap.
Who'd been in the army and was, you know.
And then when he said his name, and I went, yes, it's you.
But he recognised me.
He didn't recognise me, no.
And I thought that was amazing.
And he was my friend. that was the thing.
I thought that was amazing. He recognised me. And I mean, it was like, 30 years?
Yeah, it must be. Must be more. 40, yeah. A long time. Yeah. Linda Kane says, everyone's separated by only 8 steps. Is that right? I wonder, maybe we should do a 6 steps to something or other. 6 degrees of separation. There we go. Which would be interesting. So that's coincidences. Keep your coincidences coming along, which would be absolutely fantastic. We're at 1/2 the hour, a little after 1/2 the hour. Have you ever made homemade wine and beer? Have you tried to do it, and have you been successful? I remember when I was a kid, I was very much into ginger beer, and I wanted to make ginger beer. Our mum, let us, because she used to love, anything alcoholic, our mum.
Was it going to be alcoholic, this ginger beer?
I don't think it was alcoholic, but she loved brewing, didn't she?
Yeah,
she loved brewing. I think we must have got bitten by a bit of the bug, and I thought, what could I... And I wasn't interested in wine or beer, harsh beer, but ginger beer, as a soft drink, I like, with real ginger and everything.
Yes.
But it's quite violent. Ginger. I don't know if you've ever tried making ginger beer, and you bottle it with corks. And I remember doing this, and we put them by the boiler in the kitchen, in that big old kitchen that we had. Excuse me. And then one night, these bangs on the ceiling, on the floor, you could hear them bang. What the hell is that? And came down in the night, and there, all over the floor, was this frothy ginger beer that had just all over. There was, I don't know, about 20 odd brown bottles with these corks in, and we'd collected the bottles. Maybe I made it with Julian or Peter Richardson or one of my friends. Yes. And anyway, we'd obviously not put the corks in, and the pressure had built up, and they'd gone everywhere, and most of the ginger had come squirting out. But those that survived was very tasty. Love to make ginger beer again.
It'd be really nice, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's made a bit of a comeback, I think.
Yeah, I think, and of course ginger is very good for you. The sugar perhaps isn't as good for you as anything, but the ginger
bit's good.
Very nice.
Yes.
So there we go. That's good. Andy Joyce says another small world thing. A teacher, Miss Slater Vaughan, I had at St Andrews in Worthing, taught my eldest lad at school in Redditch. Moved
getting around.
Yeah, how amazing. Rhubarb wine, elderflower wine and cider most years. Any interesting experiences or odd things like the ginger beer? I'd like to know if that's
What
happened
about
to you.
elderberry wine then, Richard?
Elderberry, yeah.
Nice. You
nice.
didn't bother with the berries, just the elderflower.
Just the flower. Presumably you can make the elderflower, and then once the flowers have gone, you make out of the berries. So you can make up a stock. Presumably it'll last you all year round.
Yes. I've done both, elderflower and elderberry.
But you said you did something very interesting.
Well, we did. We used to make lots of different wines. So we made oak leaf wine.
Oak leaf
wine.
From the leaves of oaks?
Yeah. That was one.
So what do you do with an oak leaf? You steep it in hot water?
I think you steep it in the water with the sugar and the...
And that gives it flavour. Was it good?
Yeah, and I think it was very bright green, I seem to remember, but nice.
But nice.
But we made coltsfoot wine, and that's coltsfoot, and that's a flower, a little spring flower that comes out really, really early, and it's quite an interesting flower because it has the flower before the leaves.
Right.
So it's quite...
Flowers and then leaves.
Yes. And
coltsfoot, so it's not a horse's leg.
No, it isn't anything to do with horses. It's a flower.
Right.
And it's quite prolific. Anyway, we turned it into wine one year. Absolutely disgusting.
Oh, really?
Don't bother.
Coltsfoot,
Don't
rubbish.
bother. But raspberry wine, on the other hand, is my definite favourite.
So is that sweet or dry?
It's very, not very sweet, but it's a little bit like rosé. Fairly sweet. But we used to have an allotment, so we had raspberry canes, which we grew the raspberries for the purpose.
So why do you suppose then, if you can make wine out of all oaks leaves and coltsfoot or raspberries, elderberry and all of that, why is it the majority is made from grape? There's a question for you guys, perhaps. If you can make wine from all these things, I mean, I'm assuming that, when we have wine over here, it's quite expensive. But when you were in Spain, it's as cheap as chips, depending on how pricey your chips are, I suppose. But it's because you've got hundreds and hundreds of vineyards, and you can grow tons of grapes over there. But over here, of course, we're importing it, and we can't do it ourselves so easily. We do have English wine, of course. But if we could make it from oak leaves and... It must be a different drink, really, don't you think? Because, I mean, when I went to have my tattoo and I went to stay with some people in the south of France in a wine-growing region, what they said to me was that because it had been too hot, very, very hot summer, so the grapes had got too sweet, so they had gone over the permitted alcohol content, because the grapes were too sweet, and that affects the alcohol content. So there must, wine probably must just really be from grapes or something, and then these other things are sort of pseudo wines. Pseudo wine. So Richard Suggett, there's a question for you. Is it a pseudo wine? Is it pseudo wine? Your elderflower wine? Be interested to know about that. Graham Whittington says he used to make rose petal wine. That smells delicious. Doesn't taste good. Doesn't taste as good. Oh, okay. So fair. So some of them will taste not as good. Let's have a look, see what else. Wendy Wakelin says, my mum used to make wine and beer when I was a child. I used to have to stir the buckets of whatever it was. The funny thing is my mum is a teetotal. She used to give it all away, but obviously she just loved making, the concoction. But it is
fascinating process, isn't it?
Yes.
All the, because you have it in the bucket and then it steeps for a little bit, and then you have it in the demijohns with those little.
Oh yes, and the little air, plopping up and down.
plop, yeah.
And I remember that from my childhood because Mum used to,
in the airing cupboard.
Oh, our mother was an alcoholic, and she still is. But she would brew all sorts of stuff to the point, and so I remember the demijohns and those little things all over the blooming house, bubbling away like some chemistry laboratory. But I remember she was one time, she got so out of her tree and desperate for alcohol, she had what do you call those outdoor barrels? Those water butts full of apples that were just sitting in there fermenting. It hasn't got.
They were just. From the trees?
Yes, but our trees in the garden. She had loads of apples. She was making apple wine, and she would drink it. It wasn't even alcoholic. Hadn't got to that stage. It was just fermenting. They were just in a bucket, and she would drink it because she was just so desperate to have it. She was out of her tree at some point. It was out of her tree. So were the apples. Linda Kane says, "I haven't, but my gran made wine with anything: tea, parsnip, beetroot. She used to keep it under the stairs, and periodically we went to sample it to see if it was ready and staggered out afterwards." Yeah. How amazing is that?
I think we made dandelion wine, and I think that was the strongest wine that banana wine.
Banana wine?
We made banana wine, and that was the strongest we'd ever had.
Goodness.
That was absolutely lethal.
Really?
Yes.
So, yeah. But I still don't understand why, on the whole, we're buying wine from grapes.
Well, maybe Julia will know the answer to this, because I think that some of these wines, like the oak leaf, has got a history in paganism. They've got spiritual meaning, I think.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Hawthorn was another wine we made.
Hawthorn
leaf.
Right.
Yes,
from the leaves of hawthorn.
And I think they all have, some religious, spiritual, pagan meaning.
What was that like?
I think the leaf wines were pretty vile.
Right, so I mean,
that's probably why they're not made, isn't it?
Yes, and I suppose it's a worldwide palate that we've all just got used to, and these other things are to our mind novices. But I guess if you go back to pagan times, people were making wine like mead out of honey and all sorts of things.
We wouldn't have had grapes, would we?
Well, no, but we could have had wine out of oak leaves. They could have made a fermented drink.
Well, then they might have added honey to make it more palatable.
Yeah.
There's probably old books with all those interesting recipes. I mean, I think the reason to do it now is it's because it's fun discovering it all.
Yes, absolutely. Going back to the small world, Mark Selwood says, "My small world thing was my ex-girlfriend's dad was my first boss upon leaving school, who I hated. When I found out who her dad was, I was like, oh no." So that's very unfortunate. James DeWill says, "An old housemate of my mother's when she was very young in London ended up teaching me at primary school. My mother was horrified as I learnt later my mother had thrown her out of the flat and they hadn't parted on good terms." Mark says, "Another coincidence my mum told me yesterday when she met my ex-girlfriend, and she would still like to call me up again, apparently." Oh. Do you still like her? Maybe you could get it together, Mark.
Yeah, romance in the air, perhaps.
Romance. It would be nice to have a bit of romance on the show. Linda Kane says, "I make sloe gin and bramble gin." You see, that's
yeah, that sounds nice. Bramble gin.
I wonder if you could make gin from oak leaves and stuff. I mean, surely it must depend how many leaves you use. If you don't use as many, perhaps it's not as strong. So you have a lighter flavour. James DeWill says, "Wine comes from the vine. Other wines are a misnomer."
Oh, they're not pseudo wines; they're misnomers.
Misnomers. So vine and wine. Oh yeah, comes from the vine. Hence, grapes grow on a vine.
Yes.
And so, right. So they're not named. But they're still an alcoholic drink, I suppose. But Merry Down Wines got ill on that, says Linda Kane. Tried banana beer, but not wine. Yeah, banana beer's quite nice. Once. You couldn't drink a session of banana beer. Banana bread beer.
Oh, no.
I think I've had. Banana wine would be a liquor That's very... And so what...
Oh, that's probably why we were so drunk.
Ah, so that's interesting.
We were drinking it like, yeah.
Yeah, so okay, we were learning stuff tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We're all learning. Nobody learns more like me because the old brain cell in there gets a new bit of information every day and the last bit of information passes out. Steve Blakey says, Mr. Knight taught me in the 70s at St Andrews. Then my eldest son was taught by him in the late 80s in Durrington High. And he asked my son, please tell me your dad's not a train driver. My son said, yes, he is. And Mr. Knight put his head in his hands. Why? Like father, like son.
Yes.
Richard Sutter says, I suspect something to do with the Romans bringing wine to our shores. Could be wrong thinking out loud. Well, I suppose they did, didn't they? And then Linda Kane says Romans introduced the wines. What did the Romans do for us? They introduced wines. So there we go. Anyway, so there we are. So we found out that wines grow on a vine. Grapes grow on a vine, and because of that, it's a wine.
And everything else is
a misnomer. Is maybe it's a liqueur.
In fact, you could start an alternative wine company called the Misnomer.
Yes, there we are, Misnomer Wines, which would be good.
In fact, I might start that Misnomer Wines.
Misnomer, yes, as in MISS. Hello, I'm Misnomer. So
I could give it to my patient, so that might cure many problems.
And that is a perfect link, ladies and gentlemen, because we now are moving our topic onto what is your best or worst medical experience. Corinne, as you know, is a nurse. And, of course, as we did the show, she says, I have loads of good, bad medical experiences because I work in
I go there
hospitals.
nearly every day.
Yes.
So I don't think it counts. It's not the same.
No, absolutely. But so we'd be interested in what's happened to you.
Have you been at the receiving end? What's
Yes.
it like being on the receiving end?
Either as somebody who's had to go to the doctors, somebody who's perhaps had the paramedics? No. Paramedics.
Get your teeth.
I know, get your teeth.
You've had the wine.
It's this is
Don't tell the viewers.
It's the cure, you know. It is the cure.
It's the cherry wine.
Fantastic. It's very nice. Or at the hands of the hospital. Be interested in your thoughts. Kiwi wine, says Richard Suggett, be an interesting experiment. Malcolm Glazier says about the Romans, they had better roads than we have now. Yes, I bet they did, and they weren't quite congested. If they were, no doubt the centurions would march and get everybody off the road, which would be fantastic. Wouldn't it be lovely to be a centurion?
Just clear the way.
Just clear the path and go out of the way, you slow dithering people. Get out of the way. Steve Blakey says his worst medical experience was having my legs amputated, so now I'm bumming around. Well, we've seen the videos, Steve. We've seen the videos on Facebook, and you're certainly not bumming around anymore. You've got those amazing artificial legs, and your progress is astounding and an inspiration to other people who may have, just hurt their little finger. Because when people see you getting up and going for a walk, just like Douglas Bader did, you are an inspiration. So certainly don't say that. The Romans drank wine by mixing it with water. Yes. Right. Well,
and they do still do that in France.
Mix wine with water.
Yes. Well, because
isn't wine made with water though?
Yes, but at the table, children start to drink wine fairly young. Maybe, I don't know,
right,
10.
But
and
so
then they will
mix
have
it with water so they get a climate. So it just
probably not just France.
Yes, because I'm here. Great going, Steve, says the lovely Julia. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I was thinking because back in the day, water, of course, was not a good thing to drink on its own because it's likely to have been contaminated because there's nobody purifying the water. People are chucking their bedpans and their rotting carcasses into the streets and things are dying. Animals are falling into wells and rotting away. So you had to boil the water, and hence things like wine and I guess and beer in England was the drink, and small beer is what you used to give to children and young people because it was very weak. Small beer is
weak.
very weakened down.
Yeah.
Beer, sort of the second or third fermentation of the beer.
But then the beer, none of the beers was as strong as it was now, was it? I mean, because if you had to just drink beer all day and go to work, you'd never matter. Well, I wouldn't.
Well, there was no scientific proper way of working out how strong or weak your beer was likely to be. It was a very different drink back then, but you did have ale, what did they call them, ale masters, ale men, who would go round, and they were their scientific method of making sure the beer was the right strength was they would sometimes pour it onto a seat and they would sit on it and see how sticky it was. And if it wasn't sticky, if it was too adulterated with water or too weak, they would
stick enough.
Yeah, that's it. You would be spoken to the constable and run out of town, or think that sort of thing. Mark Selwyn said he ended up in A&E with a sprained leg, sent home, and after a while his leg got shorter. Then the doctor admitted that they had a broken right femur.
I'm amazed you could walk on it, to be honest, Mark, if it was broken. I mean, it must have been absolutely agony.
Dreadful.
Yeah.
Paul Hines says my mate treated a sexual infection with a fish treatment for fin rot and white spot called fish pen, penicillin 250, because he was scared to go to the doctor. This was something he was
too embarrassed. Yeah.
So he tried. Did it work though? That's the thing. Did it work? Will we all be, the next time we get a bit of gonorrhea?
Can we just simply
can we go and get some
something
fish
from the vet?
Yeah, a bit of fish rot or whatever it was, fin rot. Richard Sugger says Regency House had beer chutes in the road. Oh yes, so yeah, you could roll your barrels of beer in your Regency. A bit much, I suppose, like a pub, of course. James DeWill says beer in Tudor times was only about 1% to 2% alcohol, wasn't it? I guess they couldn't brew it to the same degree, maybe. I mean, we've scientifically got our barley and our what's the stuff that the hops. It's principally the sugars that do the alcohol. We've got up to an optimum where we can brew to any strength that we like, I think, within certain reasons and certain legal things. But back then, of course, I guess it depended on your crop, because you had droughts, you had wet days when the crop would be ruined and it was expensive and you were trying to save money and all sorts. So I think it sort of varied a lot, and it was things like porter back in the 17th and 16th century was much thicker, more like a soup. And the porters who would unload at the London docks or the Southampton docks would drink this dark, gruely, alcoholic drink, because it was more like porridge than actually the drink that we have now, because it sustained them to carry all this stuff.
Okay.
So it's interesting, because they didn't have all the great fine sieves and things that they did have them, but they. What's
the average alcohol content of beer now then?
I suppose an average is about 4.5%,
right.
Something like
that. So it's double.
3.6 is like a weak beer
yeah.
in real ale, and 4.5 you get 6 and 7%. 7 is quite strong. 8, 9. I've had a 9%. When we did the beer show. That is quite heady stuff. And the lovely Charles Stell, who I must say just very quickly, Charles Stell, thank you so much for your incredible donation. Made a very substantial donation. We're all now going to be drinking champagne for the rest of the year, ladies and gentlemen, thanks to Charles Stell. But when my old friend Jimmy and I went and stayed with Charles Stell in Arkansas back in 2006, and Charles's lovely wife Brandy was alive. She sadly died since. They both gave us some moonshine.
Oh!
And I can tell you, Jimmy and I were on the floor very quickly with moonshine. It was hilarious, and I will never forget that. And I'm sure Charles will never forget that either. So that was interesting. Fish antibiotics, says Richard Suggett, are the same as antibiotics for humans but have different names.
Yes, but are they the same doses?
Yes. What do you give a fish?
I mean, a fish isn't going to have very many milligrams compared to a human, surely.
Yes, how would you work it out?
I mean, you probably have to
Maybe
eat very
you have to
many.
weigh get a fish and say this fish weighs 3 pounds, so we need to weigh as many fish to equivalent to your poundage, and then how much would we have given that fish? So
we're going to be 20 tablets.
Yes, ram them down. And how do a fish take those tablets? Yes. How do they swallow them? Perhaps they break them in half for them, and
they just put them in the hole of the water.
Oh yes, there we are. Look, all of you. You all look like you've got headaches. Here we are, a bit of paracetamol for you, poor little fishes.
Showing our complete ignorance.
So there we are. Emily Champion says, I once drank too much tequila and used a Sharpie pen, whatever that is, to draw a moustache on a lady's face. A Sharpie, is that a Sharpie pen? Is that like a permanent marker? I'm assuming it must be. so that you know. And what did she do? And was she drunk to let you do that?
Was she just wake up in the morning and think, oh my God,
I've got a false moustache and I can't shave it off.
Can't get rid of it.
How amazing.
I got that interview this morning.
Andy Ash is asking the same question. Is it permanent ink? Richard Sykes says, fish antibiotics is administered to the water. So it'll say on the packet how many milligrams. Oh, okay.
Thank you very much.
So that's what we should give to our mother, because our mother is always asking for antibiotics.
Just put it in the water.
Just put it in the vodka, probably is the best for her. Alex Whitlock says, when I arrived in the UK, the average ABV in pubs and bottles was 3.6, and loads of beers and lager were 3.2. Yeah, so 3.6 these days is considered a weak one.
Yeah.
You know, certainly in real ale. Alcohol, what does ABV stand? Alcohol before volume, is it? Alcohol, something like that. Mark Selwood says, was the lady inebriated too? She must have been.
To allow
a drunk woman.
Or to not notice it.
Come up to you with a marker pen. Or was she just asleep? Lee Freeston reminds us that Jesus turned water into wine. Popcorn Sutton turns water into moonshine. Whoever Popcorn Sutton is sounds like a lovely name. We must check him out. Alex Whitlock, you wang 'em in the water. Oh yeah, just drink the tank water to get your antibiotics. There you go. Make sure you don't swallow the fish.
So we have a fish tank at work.
There you go.
And so when the patients don't want to take their antibiotics, we could just put them in the water and then just divvy that out instead.
Yeah, have a glass of this.
This delicious.
It's just carrots floating about in there. It's not goldfish. Nothing to do with that. So how exciting is that? Gosh. Well, I think it's nearly time is up. We haven't looked in the group, so I'm just very quickly wary that we haven't looked in the group. Oh, I beg your pardon. Group time, ladies and gentlemen. It's group time. So let's just very quickly have a quick look in the group, see what pictures that you have been posting. Sorry, I've just got a few pop-ups coming up, which is Windows Defender, like in the middle of a show. Thanks, Microsoft. Let's have a look at what you've been posting in the Bald Explorer group. Lovely pictures. Here we go. Are you ready to do the dance?
Yes.
Yes, here it is.
Yes. Out of sync.
Marvellous. We only have to do a little bit. So here we are. So here's a lovely picture by Peter
gorgeous.
Vine, talking about vines. This is from Roundway Down.
It's beautiful,
isn't it? I don't know quite where Roundway Down is. It's in Hampshire somewhere, probably. Very lovely. And all the everyone's posting poppy pictures, which is fantastic.
They've been brilliant this year, haven't they, the poppies?
Absolutely stunning. Very nice. Paul Hine is asking this question. He puts this up and says, where in Sussex? No, I don't think he's in Sussex. Where am I? I'm not quite sure what county he's in. And that's the only clue. That's the only clue. Absolutely no idea.
Somebody will know.
I'm guessing that is a trig point, but other than that, I don't know. Meanwhile, Linda Kane has been putting more flowers up, which has been lovely. Look
Gorgeous.
at these delicious roses. I was at Parham House with the lovely Julia and Cynthia Julian yesterday, I think it was, and we were taking pictures of their wonderful roses in Parham House garden.
They're gorgeous colour, aren't they?
Beautiful
That's
colour.
a bit of a Julia colour, I
That
would
is,
say.
yeah, no, I
Yes.
think Julia would be very impressed. And talking of the lovely Julia, and Parham, she's been bunging up some fantastic pictures of our day, well worth checking out, because we also went to St. Peter's Church, and here it is. It's a fascinating church. Julia captured some amazing pictures of the church and of the inside and of some of the incredible pews. So go and check those out in the Bald Explorer group. Definitely worth a look. Here is a wonderful night shot. I think it's night time, not early morning. This is Joe Smith at Biddenden, and we're going to Biddenden very soon to do some coverage of this incredible village. But this is outside of her window, and you can just see the sheep out there as the sun sets down. Beautiful colours. Thanks, Joe. Here, Elaine Brazier, knowing that we'd been out on the traction engine, spotted this monster outside a pub local to her in Kent, in Preston, Kent. So there we go. That looks very nice. I wouldn't like to get underneath that one and be a bit of a flat pancake. That wouldn't be so good. This is a London plane, but what a colossal London plane this one is. And Andrew Graham found this near Bath at a place called Abbey Green. So that's an amazing London plane in full leaf. Julia and I, funnily enough, saw a couple of London planes the other day. I don't know if they're in Julia's pictures that down at Parham, and yesterday, in fact.
Have you ever seen one that big?
No,
though?
that is. I think that's one of the biggest. Although there are some very big ones in Cowdray Park, I remember. And here is a slightly smaller London plane, and this is only up the road from where I live. Steve Blakey posted this. I know exactly where this is. Just up the road where Teville Gate used to be. If you can see in the back of that picture, just towards the left-hand side, there's a sort of multi-storey car park that's now gone. Teville Gate, the monstrosity that was Teville Gate, has been demolished, and I'm absolutely thrilled to report that, although who knows what monstrosity is going to go up and replace it. But at the moment now we have clear skies there, which is great. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your wonderful stories. It's been so nice. Joe Smith saying it was morning. Oh, it was morning. Oh, right. 4:45 as the sun rose in Biddenden. So there we go. Do watch out, because I'm coming to Biddenden. I've got a number of interesting projects that Joe and I are setting up. So we're very thrilled to do that. It's a fascinating place with a lot of interesting characters. I've already met one. I won't say who he was. But there you go. It was all good stuff. Linda Kane says, Trig points generally triangulish and concrete think. Have you been drinking? I didn't understand a word of that. But there we go. Oh, trig points are generally triangulish and made of concrete. Yes, I have seen some that are made, though, like that.
But that might be like a Sussex one, because it's got the flint in, mightn't it?
Yeah, no, I've seen them in. I think there's some in Shropshire that are made not from concrete but made of different stones. But there we go. So there we are. Anyway, thank you so much. We've come to the end of the show. We mustn't overrun our time, because Facebook don't like us monopolising all the audience, all the people on Facebook, as you can imagine, because they all tune in to the Vobes show, allegedly. He lies glibly. So, now, you know how to get out of the show, don't you? You know the magic words, don't you?
Please let me out of here.
She doesn't know it. She doesn't know it. The lovely Julia knows it. And most of the audience know it now. When you hear this music...
Oh, yes, I do.
She'll remember next time.
Yes.
It means that my sister and I have got to drive back down to our father's house, because she's left her phone at Dad's house accidentally when we were clearing out the loft.
It's gone with all the clutter.
It's gone with the clutter in the skip, and it's gone probably to landfill. So we're going to go and retrieve that from the local amenities. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. It's been an absolute hoot. Thank you for all your comments and feedback. We've enjoyed reading them. And we hope that the lovely Corinne will come back and we'll do another show soon.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Till the next time, from lovely Corinne and lovely me. Although I'm not really supposed to say I'm lovely, because
from
that's
lovely
a bit
Richard.
of
Yes.
self-appreciation. Until tomorrow, when I'll be flying on my own, no doubt. Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.